Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new lowly album, Hifalutin. Slowly are a Danish dream pop band that I first caught whiff of around the time of their Sink Way Into Me EP. And to be honest, I actually really liked this EP. There were tons of very dreamy vocals and actually some pretty sweet hooks. While this EP didn't really blow me away, I honestly wasn't bored with it. I actually liked it quite a bit. But I felt like some of the longer, more patience-testing tunes on here needed a little work. But around the time of their 2017 debut album, Heba, I honestly didn't see any progression in the band. The dreamy atmospheres and the vocals were sweet and all, but once again, I found myself finding these song structures to be incredibly patience-testing and just plain boring at times. And sadly, these new singles really aren't that better, but let's chat about this thing. This album starts off with Go For A Walk, and honestly, it's actually a pretty sweet and awesome opener. I do like the atmosphere here. It's actually really strong and pretty beautiful. And vocalist Nana Shanang actually sounds like incredible here. There are some very interesting production choices here, but as this one rolls on, it just sounds like Lowly really know what they're doing. And I love the way that this one just continues to hit in waves, just adding new features constantly. It's times like this where I certainly get the hype behind this band. Later on in the album, Out Beyond is actually a really pleasant, well thought out and sweet ballad. Now, I'm still not too wild about some of the vocal effects that are used here. That I could take or leave. But the glitchy production comes off really tasteful here. And these harmonies honestly couldn't be more spot on if the band tried. It's a really heartwarming ballad that actually shows a lot of progression and brings a lot of new thoughts to the dream pop table. I didn't think that was possible. Also, the distant synths and strings, really nice touch. And Children is sort of interesting to say the very least. Now, there are some elements of this track that I'm not exactly into, but I find the production here fascinating. One thing I do have issue with this track, and it's an issue that I have with a lot of tracks on this album, is I feel like I'm sitting here twiddling my fingers waiting for something to happen. There's a lot of tracks on here that are just very patience testing, and most of the time when it's a little bit of a down point in a song, there's really no tune in sight. Children eventually does open up like halfway through into a pretty stunning jam that I end up absolutely loving, but it takes so damn long. Like, this track by the end of it actually ends up coming off awesome, but just why did it take so long? A few tracks later, Selver, once again, pretty decent. I actually think a lot of the very icy, weird layers to this track are pretty interesting. Like, spoiler alert, I don't really enjoy most of this album, but in times like this, I feel like I would have enjoyed this track maybe a little bit longer if most of this album wasn't so dead and patience testing. But I do still really love Selver. I really love the sense of isolation to this track. In a way, this almost reminds me of like an early James Blake single. And not for nothing, 1236 might be the best track here. This is the sort of icy, beautiful tune that I needed like halfway through this album. I wouldn't call this like adventurous or anything like that, but honestly, it's just freaking gorgeous and nice to hear. The production is very classy, the instrumental is bright and colorful, and Nana's vocals are actually some of her best here. Not to mention, it just has such a cinematic feel to it. Like, who would have thought that? Where was this track when half of the first half of this album is just so boring? If we got more tracks like this, Lowly would be on the top of their game right now. But sadly, they are not. While I've loved a handful of tracks here, most of this album is abysmal. Early on in the album, Steven is just so busy for some reason. Like, I'm down for a more upbeat and busy track for these guys, but this is just too busy, which is weird. All of a sudden, after her stunning debut, Nana really doesn't sound like she has any presence whatsoever. Like, I feel like there's just so much going on in this track that I can't focus on anything. The beat is like average at best, and the production choices aren't nearly as fascinating. As a matter of fact, they're pretty questionable. This track just ends up being so incredibly boring. A lot of these tracks, like Baglians, from a distance, sound beautiful and genre-breaking. Like, the ambient sounds here that are used and the desolate sound to this all is actually pretty beautiful. But once again, Lowly lose me so fast. Some of the vocal effects here are some of the most unnecessary I've heard all year. And it's a shame because Nana actually has an incredible voice. But the very basic instrumental and average production here just make it very well known that there's like nothing too exciting on this track. Certainly nothing must listen. Once again with staples, like, why is there so much going on here? I feel like Lowly have a real issue with finding a sort of medium. More often than not on this album, Lowly bounce back and forth from just being way too upbeat and busy to painfully boring without anything in the middle. And it's a shame because on this one, some of the quirky production is rather fascinating. And when this one picks up for the chorus, it's actually pretty decent. But so much of this track to me is just headache inducing. In the Hearts, like, oh Jesus, this track is so minimal, so boring. Like, dream pop, I get, is supposed to be a pretty minimal genre, but there is an element of, like, personality to it. I'm not feeling that here. And on this one, I'm really iffy on the vocals. Deep down, Nana actually sounds really great, but these vocal effects, once again, are unnecessary. And this instrumental is just so ugly, like, come on. Delicate Delegates is, like, fine, like, I think it's a sweet little ballad. And as far as Nana's vocals go, they're some of her sweetest here. So no, I don't think it's terrible, but after all of these incredibly, embarrassingly boring tracks, I feel like I need something to really grip me right now, and that's not this. And on top of that, we get a couple of interludes that are just filler for the most part. However, the first one, entitled One, is actually pretty great. As a matter of fact, ironically, it's one of the best tracks here. It's a stripped back, lovely little ballad that's really quite charming. It's not genre defining, it's not exciting, it's not adventurous or anything like that. But it's just so warm and fuzzy, and some of the harmonies here are absolutely on point. But then we get to the 2 interlude, and once again, I really need something to wake me up, but this track is so damn boring. After all of these very patience testing, dreary dream pop tunes, the last thing I wanted was an interlude that's more or less a spoken word piece over, yes, you guessed it, another very dreary, sad dream pop tune. No thank you. And the 3rd interlude here, entitled 3, I literally have one note for this: unnecessary. And honestly, Wonder is not the finale I wanted to hear at all. It's just, once again, another very slow, dreary, atmospheric ballad, which is fine. That's gonna happen on a dream pop album. As a matter of fact, I feel like every great characteristic of a decent dream pop album is here, not only on this track, but on many tracks. But there is just something that rubs me so wrong about this finale and most of this album as a whole. It just bores me to tears for the most part. Trust me, there's a handful of really great, beautiful ballads here with a lot of quirky production and some great vocal snippets that are actually really fascinating. But most of this album is patience testing to the max. I can handle a dreary atmospheric ballad as much as the next dream pop fan, but these are tuneless, these are boring, nothing happens. Half the time I'm just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. So for me, I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on this album. But let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you guys would like for me to chat about in the future. Until next time, have a great day, guys.